Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there, to the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers. Happy New Year. How are you doing? How was it getting through the holidays? I had a pretty rough time during the holidays, which is one of the reasons why I'm talking to you today. But how are you doing? How's your nervous system? Are you getting reset? At the end of this episode, I have some kind of exciting announcements and something to do with Rosie O'Donnell. I could use your help. What I'm going to do in this episode is I'm going to tell you the story of what happened, and then I'm going to go back and tell you what the 10 things are that I used to help me get through. I think I may have seasonal affective disorder, and I'm going to talk about how this unfolded, and it's not like I went into it going, oh, I'm having seasonal affective disorder. These are the 10 steps that I'm going to use to help me get through it. What happened is I hit this slump and really struggled and suffered. And as I came out of it, I thought about what were the things that helped me manage. And I'll be really honest with you, it's not like these made things 100% better, but I think that these are the things that kind of kept me just barely afloat during that time. And my intention in doing this episode is, I think many of us, a lot of the people that I'm talking to, clients, I have a number of therapist friends that I have. I'm pretty involved in social media. And with this pandemic, we've been under stress for close to a year now with the elections, if you're in the US, with the runoffs, with some of the things that have been going on politically. We're seeing stuff that we never, ever saw before, and hopefully we'll never, ever see again. The stress is just crazy. And the other thing that I'm finding is the ongoing stress really does impact executive functioning. And what I found is I've been distractible. I can't focus. I forget my words. I'm an avid reader. I love reading, and I have not been able to focus enough to sit down and read a book. I love puzzles. I can't do puzzles. I love crafts. I haven't been able to craft. And especially during this holiday season that I'm going to tell you about, man, was my sensitivity up. I got my feelings hurt very easily. I had to pull back from some relationships. And what I notice is that when my mood dips, I tend to get irritable. And so a lot of the time I just kind of was quiet because I knew that I was going to lash out. And I think because of the way my attachment injury shows up, I want to blame people and make people responsible for how I'm feeling. I'm not proud of it. I don't suggest it. I'm not advocating it. I'm just being pretty upfront and transparent with you all. And the other thing is that I haven't been kayaking, and I'm going to do a separate episode about that. Something happened, everybody's safe, but there was a little minor mishap and it kind of created some trauma. And I'm seeing that with it being cold, I really don't like being cold and wet. And so that's been a major, something missing in my life that was really helping me thrive over the holidays. And in one of the earlier episodes, I talked about masks, and I said, I don't mean to get political. And I reflected on that. Masks and a pandemic are not political. It never should have been political. If I lose listeners over this, I'm okay with that. We have a global pandemic, and keeping safe is really important. Now, everybody gets to decide what works for them to keep them safe. This is not about judgment. I'm reluctant to share what my family did. I'm not sure how much I'll disclose to you, but we have to make choices for our mental health, for our sense of safety. Everybody gets to do what they want. But Christmas looked really different this year, and because my boys don't live in the home with us, they go to college, they live in other cities, I didn't feel comfortable having them come and stay in the home with us. We did rent a place for them where they could stay. We wore masks in the house. We ate our meals outdoors. We opened gifts on the back patio on Christmas morning, distanced with masks on. It's what I needed to do to feel safe. And one of my sons wanted to stay longer, and I felt awful not being able to have him stay longer because right now I'm just not comfortable having people that don't live in our home stay in our home. I think on Christmas Day, my son and I, or the day before, we had kind of a big upset. we recreated the dance that we do in our family. And what it looked like is he made a choice to do something. I knew he was going to do it, even though I'd set out the parameters of what felt comfortable and safe to me regarding the pandemic. I wasn't explicit about why this behavior wasn't okay. And then his brother, who was going to be staying with him in this place that we rented, and his brother's girlfriend didn't feel comfortable because he did something that wasn't really the best thing to do. So not only did I have to talk to my son, who called me anal, and I said to him, you can call me anal, but I could be calling you irresponsible. And I think that really struck a chord with him. I tend to be pretty even when I talk to my kids. I'm very, very conscious about not calling them names. I have shortcomings that, my stuff comes out other ways, but it's not over to the eye. And then what happened with my other son is he got very upset with me because I knew what this other son had done and I didn't prevent him from doing it. And my other son got really upset with me, and he was right. And this is a pattern that goes on in our family, that goes on for me, that sometimes with my kids, I have a hard time setting boundaries. I have a hard time making sure that they're doing what they need to be doing. And I told him he was right. And I really appreciated that I've created enough safety that he could tell me that. I also realized later on that there's a double bind that I get into because I tend to be, and I feel like sometimes I tell you my husband's sensitive, sometimes I tell you one of my kids is an HSP. It shows up differently for all of us. And my husband, I don't think is a highly sensitive person, but he has some areas where he's very sensitive. My son may be an HSP. I don't know. So I feel like if you listen to different episodes, I'm telling you I'm the only HSP in the house, and other ones I tell you that they're HSP. So I want to own my inconsistency. So I change their status based on my story. But I notice it because I tend to be the one that is consistently more concerned about safety and worries and is anxious about people's well-being. And obviously with the pandemic, my conservative needs to stay safe are running higher than everybody else. I feel like I'm viewed as, kind of the nervous Nelly conservative mom. And so I have this thing of, if I end up confronting them on it, I feel like then I get backlash because I'm nagging at them. I don't feel like I'm articulating this very well, but I realize this kind of bind that I get into, and it's something that we'll need to talk about. So the dance in our family was the one son got, very angry very quickly. It escalated. I allowed myself to get angry, which I'm okay with. My husband stayed calm as a cucumber. My other son got upset with my son and with me. We all ended up talking it out and it was fine, but this is the family dance that we do. And it just was interesting that since my kids are 20 and they've moved out, I kind of thought, oh, great, we've worked through this. And what we don't work through keeps coming back so we can keep working on it. But on Christmas Day, it was hard. One of the sons that came home was talking about how much he misses being a kid and when things were easier. I get it. And this year has just been so different. And I really felt, I have a lot of grief around the holidays not looking like they normally do. Hopefully it will just be this year. Hopefully by next year, things will be balanced and stable. And this will just be one Christmas that we had to celebrate this way. But as I was doing my year-end writing, one of the things that I was just longing for is, for the boys to be able to come home and stay at home, to come home as much as they want, to be here, to have friends over. And it just was really hard. And one or both of my kids talked about how much I've changed during COVID. And I have. My hypervigilance is up. My worry is up. That part of me that feels like light and fun and breezy. I don't know where the heck that one is. I just feel like I've really been in survival mode and it's really been hard. I'm grateful that they were able to say it. I'm grateful we were able to name it and talk about it. We talked a lot about how difficult and how different this holiday was. It doesn't mean that there were things about it that we didn't enjoy, but it really made the holiday much harder. Even though the holidays were much simpler this year, I also realize that I just get really stressed out around the holidays. It's too much. The stimulation is too much. The expectations is too much. And I think having it be so simple and still noticing how stressed I was, I realized that I have so much energy on doing the right thing, doing enough, and I am not naturally a gift giver. If I'm out and I see something and I think about someone, I love to get them a gift, but having to buy a gift because it's an occasion, it just stresses me out. And because I struggle with transitions, my gremlins are going off because I'm like, you're not talking about the struggle that you had with your mood. I'm getting there. I'm just doing it in a very circuitous way. But it just creates so much stress about, is it the right gift? Is it enough? What about this person? What about that person? And this whole concern about, am I doing enough? Are people going to be disappointed? I just really, the holidays are just really challenging for a number of reasons. Anyways, what I noticed was my energy was just down. My mood was down even after the holidays. And I just found myself really sitting and spending a ton of time on TikTok. I am not able to focus on watching TV. There's just not much that's holding interest for me. And I guess what I want to say is with what I'm talking about is I don't want to normalize depression. And if you are not functioning well, please seek help. I really don't want to normalize symptoms of depression. And at the same time, I want to talk about what some of us may be experiencing and trying to figure out when do we cross over, because I really believe that being deep feelers and deep thinkers, we often do have feelings that impact our mood. And some of us have depression, some of us don't. During this holiday period, I thought, how many times have I talked about, I don't have depression. I was diagnosed and I don't have depression. I'm like, holy moly. Maybe I do have depression. I really think that I have seasonal affective disorder. And I started thinking back over the years and how many times around Christmas time I really, really, really struggled. And I don't think I ever made those connections that I think for me around wintertime, I just really struggle with my mood. So I have a better idea of next year going into it, the things that will help me. And I can kind of anticipate what are the things that are going to make it a little bit smoother for me. And if it does hit, it's like, this is that thing again. But it really was a hard time. And I'm usually really good about being able to talk about what's going on and to articulate. And something just happened. And I think that there's maybe some trauma that's involved. And when I have this trauma response, I just separate from my body and I don't want to be in my feelings. And I really wasn't even able to talk very much about what was going on. It just was a really, really, really hard time for me. I don't know that there's that much that I did to get myself out of it, but in retrospect, I can see things that I did that made it more manageable, that kept me connected and kept me feeling okay enough. Like I didn't feel great. And it's not like if you do these things, your life will be amazing. But I do think that there are things that we can do on a daily basis, even when we're struggling. And those are the things that I wanted to talk about. So there are 10 of them. The first one is have at least one person you can talk to about how you're doing. And even if you can't go into depth about it, I think naming the fact that we're struggling, naming that we're pulling back, whatever we use to get us comfort when we go through these periods, not being alone and in the dark, because I think that we have shame. And if we don't talk about it, that shame takes over. And I'll tell you, I'm usually pretty good about, gremlins and talking about my gremlins. I felt like I had demons coming up and it felt so real to me. And I felt like I identified with it so much. And it was kind of around not getting stuff done and not being productive. And then that feeling of the weight of things. So in the morning, I didn't really want to get up and get going because there was just too much stuff and I couldn't deal with it. Also, what I didn't do that I am going to do moving forward is to make sure that I take holidays off. All the holidays. I'm going to take a 1-month break from the podcast in July. I'm going to take a 1-month break from the podcast in December. And I'm going to take 2 weeks off from Christmas to New Year's. I haven't allowed myself to take that time off just because I kind of get so focused on working and my money scarcity that I don't think I can afford it. And this year I'm using a system called Profit First. If you're someone who's in the field, I would highly recommend it because you allocate a percentage of your income into these different types of accounts. I could see that I had enough money to pay myself. So if I wasn't making income, I was going to be fine. So the first one is to talk to at least one other person about how you're doing. And I have a number of people that I use Marco Polo with. I have some people in town. I was naming that I'm having a hard time. I'm struggling. Wasn't able to go too much in depth because I didn't know, but just to maintain that contact and to stay out of shame. The second one is basic self-care. Now, it's going to be really important as you're listening to me that I'm not telling you these things to use it as a way to beat yourself up if you're not doing them, but we need to talk about this. So it's really important to decide where your wiggle room is and at what point should you be concerned. So for me, and I'm not going to share with what mine is because everybody has their own thing. If you struggle with things like brushing your teeth or flossing or showering or taking your medications or supplements or getting dressed or not going out, what is the interval that this is just normal? And at what point does it become a concern? And for me, it's very clear which things, if I don't do when it crosses over, I need to start being concerned because now I'm out of kind of my normal range of what I normally do, or how much you stay in bed, or how much TV you watch, or things like that. The third one is to notice, what are your patterns? So some people, when they get stressed, they end up keeping busy. They may get more physically active. They may be putzing around. It may be a way to distract. Sometimes this is a healthy thing. So it's not that any of these things are good or bad. Is it serving us, and are we doing it too much or not enough? Do you withdraw? Do you withhold? And it's really interesting that I'm doing a lot of work around attachment and generational trauma. And anybody who's gone through the depression, this whole thing of withholding and scarcity is pretty strong in my family. And before I stopped kayaking, it was really interesting that I was feeling this angst and, I was wanting something with food, but it's I wanted everything and nothing. It's not like there was something really specific that I wanted. And my husband and I went to Costco and they had this little container of mixed Christmas cookies. And I picked it up, I put it in the basket, I took it out. I probably picked it up at least 3 times because I didn't really like all the cookies and I didn't want to eat the whole thing of cookies. And there was a chance if we got it, I would. And I ended up getting the cookies. And I think the day that we got them, I don't know, I had 5 or 7 cookies. Not a moderate serving, but it's not like I ate the whole thing. There was something about how satisfying having those cookies was. It really satisfied something in me that I really needed. And I felt happy knowing that there were cookies there if I wanted to have cookies. And it was enough to get me to go kayaking and I didn't even know that I was withholding from myself. When I get in this place where I just want to eat everything, I just want everything, it makes it hard to know what to do. And I didn't even realize I was withholding until I bought these cookies. So if you have a tendency to withhold, is that going on, and how can you give to yourself? And it doesn't have to be with food. That's just how it shows up for me. This is the fourth one. So the fourth thing is, and at the end, I will read these over for you and they will be in the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com. What would bring you pleasure, which we kind of just talked about. So guilt-free. And is that reading, watching a movie, having a special meal, doing an activity, taking a bath, baking? And often what happens is when we're in these mood states, all we can do is just binge watch TV and we beat ourselves up. So if that's where you're at and you're just watching a lot of TV, can you just let that be okay? I think we have so much exhaustion right now that there's so much pushing. And even if we don't feel like we're doing a lot, just managing during this pandemic, if you're in the States with what's been going on politically, if you're homeschooling kids, if you've had changes in your income or work or your living situation, if you're experiencing systemic racism, if you're experiencing discrimination, there's so much that's been going on, and just getting through and managing. And then often when we have this time off, it's really, really hard because either we're exhausted and we just kind of crash and burn. Or the other thing is that many of us, me, and this is true for many of the HSPs that I talk with, we do so much better when there's structure. There's this bind when we have time off and having vacations that sometimes it's nice and sometimes it creates more pressure. And with the pandemic, we've lost a lot of that external structure that kind of keeps us accountable and holds us together. I changed how I dress if I'm home all the time and I'm not seeing clients outside of the house, or if I wear makeup or not. And there are times when I do dress a little nicer, I will put on some makeup for myself. Ideally, that's how we would want it to be. But often it's those external structures of having to get up and meet somebody, or to be at work, or for an appointment. And without all of that, being at home right now, if you're working from home or staying at home, and then having vacation time, that can really make it hard. The transitions can be hard, the starting, the stopping. The struggle is real. The fifth one is to just do one small thing. And I think this is about momentum. And I know that it's really easy that when we have moods that are not, we're not in a mood state that we would like to be in, it's so easy to shut down and withdraw. And in order for us to receive the little gifts and blessings that happen every single day, and it can be something like, cuddling a pet or a nice exchange with the letter carrier. I mean, I'm not talking about significant things if you're outside and you see a beautiful flower or the sunrise or the sunset is beautiful. Very small gifts and blessings. But if we totally withdraw, then we miss out on that and we really get stuck in our heads. If that's where you're at, it's totally okay. But being able to respond to people, respond to email, to text, to phone calls, to just stay a little bit engaged and to just do one little thing. And if it's a little bit of a task or putting something away or doing a load of laundry, those things help us to feel like we're at least doing a little something. The louder voice probably is telling us that no matter what we're doing, it's not enough, we're not enough. That's just the nature of the beast. The sixth strategy is kindness and compassion as you can manage, because when we get in these places, the voices just are relentless. And knowing that if the best that I can do today is to be on TikTok all day on my phone and I'm not making the best food choices, the reality is I'm not doing anything else. So I can either hate myself and beat myself up for all the things that I think that I should be doing, or to extend as much kindness and compassion and knowing that I'm doing the best that I can. And how many of us at some point in our lives, and for me, I talk about weight because that's really relevant for me. How many times in our lives have we felt terribly overweight, and 10 years later, we look back at a picture and our weight has changed significantly since then, and we would be thrilled to be back in that place and be that, quote, fat again. It's not my intention to do any fat shaming if you have body image issues or eating disorders. It's not my intention to activate or shame anybody. But I also think that when we are functioning in a certain way, we get down on ourselves and we don't recognize the things that we are doing that are helping us to manage, because I think our feeling state can just get so intense. And if we have trauma, that, we get into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and that trauma response really can impair us. And if you're resonating with these things and it's severe and you have trauma or you're not sure, please seek somebody out who can help you. I struggle with this, wanting to normalize and validate, but also not wanting, if people are having trauma responses, to not get help because I'm talking about experiencing it myself. It's a fine line for me to walk. The seventh one is to try and get outside at least for 10 minutes a day. I know everybody lives in different places around the world, but just getting a little bit of natural sunlight and getting outside can really help, even if it's in your pajamas, even if you're just out in your robe. Obviously, if it's snowing or freezing where you live, then that may not be possible. The eighth thing is to start tracking your mood and notice trends. And this can be really reassuring. And like I said, I'm 57 years old, and it just occurred to me that I think that I struggle around wintertime. I think I have seasonal affective disorder, or I have some kind of trauma response that happens, or something around the cold. It doesn't matter what it is. For me, it may, mean that you want to do some more exploration, but maybe notice tracking the trends of what your mood is throughout the year so that you know, oh, I do much better during these times, or when this happens, and this is a time when it's harder. The ninth one I think is really important, and you've got to have a safe place to do this, but being able to talk about your resistance, your anger, your frustration, your sadness, your disappointment. Feelings are energy and they get trapped. And it's okay to be in a place and go, I wish I were more active. I think with social media, it's really hard that we look at what other people are doing. I actually had this kind of fantasy. I saw a TikTok about somebody's kind of future self meeting their present self, like for 2021 versus 2020. And the way that I would want my 2021 person to show up is so different than how I am. And I just tried to look at it with compassion, because there is that part of me that I want to be more active. I want to be more productive. I want to be funnier. I want to be lighter. I want to be somebody that I am some of the time, but not all of the time. And in the place that I was at, it felt really disparaging to think about how much of a distance there was between how I was currently feeling and this person that is really not who I am. I don't think I'm ever going to be that person, how that was showing up. And so being able to talk about, I wish I could do these things. I feel frustrated. I'm not eating the way that I want to. I'm watching more TV. I want to exercise. I want to be more social. I'll tell you, during COVID, I think one of the things, and for those of you, I think probably more of you are highly sensitive extroverts than you think that you are because of all the misconceptions around introversion and introversion being linked with the highly sensitive person. But I can tell you that I'm not getting enough of connection and enough stimulation. And I end up feeling really depressed, and it makes me want to withdraw even more. And what happens is, even things like getting out and walking the dog, I don't go to stores very much, but there's so much tension around, are people going to move? Is it safe? Do I need to go out in the street? Are they going to move? Do I have to move? Who should move? Like, I just feel tense and irritable and kind of on alert, where dog walks used to be like a great thing. And I loved running into neighbors and chatting with neighbors. And I just feel like I've been in survival mode since COVID started. And that is gone. And I can remember doing errands with my mom way pre-COVID. And I would chat with people in the checkout lane, and I would chat with all kinds of people. Like, I just loved engaging. I just don't have that right now. And even with neighbors, I just feel kind of on edge most of the time. And so I'm missing that sense of connection, which I love, and it keeps me thriving. And, last year, well, I guess the year before 2020, 2019, I did a tremendous amount of traveling and stretching and growing. I got nervous before every trip. I wanted to cancel. I really went through a lot of gyrations around it. But after doing those things, I saw how capable and competent I was and how much I loved connecting. And it was just, I just felt like I grew exponentially. And this year, because, we've all been very contracted, I feel like it's pulling on the parts of me that are not as strong. And I don't want to say healthy, but I think as HSPs or sensitives or creatives, we have this part of us that likes being alone. We like the quiet. We like not having the stimulation. But if you're an extroverted HSP, we need to have enough of that excitement, that novelty, that connection to kind of keep us in our happy place or that sweet spot. And I just have not had it. And it's much harder to get. It's much harder to create. And I think that's a really real thing. And when we tend to have more anxious and worrisome thoughts, and some of it is very real with the pandemic, we don't get a chance to challenge that and we don't grow. And I think that it just fosters more of this unrest for us. I'm not really sure how to articulate, but I really feel like this year has not been as great for my sense of confidence and competence and well-being and trying new things and stretching and growing and fulfillment and satisfaction. Like, it just, there are things, and I'm happy with a number of things that have happened, and it's not pushing me in a way that is helpful and healthy for me. And then the final thing is to acknowledge at least 3 things that you did. So every night when I get in bed, I just name 3 things that I did, because again, it's so easy with having these strong emotional responses to things, or if we're having a heavy emotional state, the state of the world is very heavy, that I think that it's easy to lose the balance and to at least notice the things that we did that are going well, that we can hold that tension of the both and. Yes, this heaviness can be going on, and there are things that are going well. Heavy sigh. I've kind of had the gremlins going off in my head as I've been talking about, is this relevant? Am I being too depressing? Is this resonating for people? I just really have to trust that it'll be fine. And, I want to tell you, I had a couple of videos on TikTok really get a huge number of traction. One was a mistake and it has like 30,000 views and I got more followers. But I find myself really feeling nervous about showing up on video and doing TikToks. And there's something that often feels much safer about sitting behind a microphone where you can't see me. And it is funny that I did 2 TikToks today. If you are on TikTok, my username is HSP Podcast. And I'll just kind of jump into this because one of them is for Rosie O'Donnell, and I got it this morning, and I put on some clothes to walk the dog, and I did not shower. So my hair's not done. I have a hat on, no makeup, not looking my best. And I really debated that, I like looking at least a little bit put together when I am on video. And I thought, Rosie O'Donnell doesn't wear makeup. She looks very human, very average. And I made a TikTok asking her if she would come on the podcast. I've looked on her social media. I've reached out to her. I haven't gotten any response, and I would love to have her on the podcast. So if you are on TikTok and you go to my page, there's one and the title says For Rosie O'Donnell. If you can interact with that, put a heart on it, share it, copy it, put a comment in, it generates more. Well, by the time this comes on, it's going to be too late. But anyways, I really would love to have Rosie on. So the more traction we get on that video, there's a better chance that she will see it. So where do we go from here? I really did not do any talking about the new year. I do at the end of the year. I have writing that I do every year, and I look at what went on with my kids, with my business, with my relationships, with food, with spirituality. Where were things last year? And then I write about the new year. I write about the year that we just had. And then I write about what it is that I'm wishing and hoping for the next year. So I did that. And it actually is really nice because I forget about so many of the things that I was struggling with in the previous year that aren't even issues anymore because it's so easy to focus on what's currently going on. If you are interested in doing something like that, it's not too late. And you can just even write about what are some things that you're wanting for the new year to create for yourself. Are there financial goals, spiritual goals, goals with friendships, goals with your sensitivity, with communication, with any of those things? And then to put it in a place where you can see it. Then there are a couple of other things that I now have a store that has merchandise. Thank you to Melissa Childs for setting up this store. It's at patriciayounglcsw.com. If you go, I think it says store and then you go to merchandise. We have logoed merchandise there. Now, I have to give you the kind of disclaimer. We're waiting to get our samples. I had a number of people that we all ordered merchandise to see what the quality of the items is, what the quality of the print is. I have not gotten the samples back yet. So if you want to wait until another podcast episode to see how it goes, the merchandise is printed. It's print on demand. So if you get it and you don't like it, but there's nothing wrong with it, you don't get a refund. But I've tried to order some really good samples, but we've got hats and shirts and sweatshirts and masks and bibs. Some of the things say sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's my superpower. There are ones that have the current podcast logo that you've seen. I have another logo that I'd forgotten that I had that looks a little bit different. There are mugs, all kinds of great stuff. So if you want to get that. If you have been thinking about taking the HSP online course, but you do not want to do group work, you're not ready for that, I do have just the course materials available. And again, they're also available at patriciayounglcsw.com. You just get the videos, you get emails that have the topic for the week with some additional resources, some things that you can think about. I think that the value of the group work is really where the benefit and the connection comes from, but not everybody's ready for that. So I do have that available for you now. I think that's all I have for y'all. If you have any questions, any concerns, you can shoot me an email at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. Thank you to everybody who's taken the time to reach out to me. I really do appreciate you. I have a feeling that 2021 is going to have some bumps, but it's going to have some sanity in it, especially if you're here in the States. I don't mean to leave everybody out who's not in the States, but I want to be sensitive that we're all dealing with different things this year. But I think that many things that have been going on for years and years and years, and we just didn't know about it, have been exposed. And so while it's been incredibly painful and disconcerting for some of us to really see how much yucky stuff has been going on, I'm hoping that this will be the beginning of starting to have more change. And I think that there's going to be a lot of resistance, a lot of pushing to get that change in order. And I'm just so happy to feel like we're going to have some stability and some normalcy and, maybe even some national guidelines about how to get this crazy pandemic under control. And yeah, I'm always reluctant about how much to say. Also with this new year, I am going to be doing some anti-racism stuff. I really want to have more guests on and have more diversity than I've had. If you haven't taken the podcast survey, I'm looking at the things that you said you're interested in and the topics and guests that I can bring back or do to meet your needs. I'm really happy to do that. The podcast survey, you can see it at see, this is more like my word finding, in the show notes, or if you go to unapologeticallysensitive.com, there's a tab there that says survey, and you don't have to answer all of the questions, but it helps me to get to know you and to figure out who would be good guests to have on. I think that's it. I hope you are doing well. I'm wishing you a happy new year. And how can we have expectations for this year so that we are pleased and satisfied, but are not expecting things that may not be realistic? And maybe think about a word for the year. I really try and pick a word for the year. I'm thinking this year I really want to focus more on being in my body. I think a lot of my trauma responses and fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses have to do, I just get out of my body when it happens. And so that's kind of what I'm going to focus on this year. And I haven't quite picked my word yet. I want to give a huge shout out to ShellyAaron at ShellyAaron Productions, who is so kind and generous and is editing this whole episode and putting it together for me. Shelly offered to do this for me as a gift, and I said no because I felt like it's my responsibility to do my bonus episodes. That's kind of what we've done. And I sat with it for a day, and I thought, this is another way that I withhold from myself. I'm getting teary. I finished recording. I stepped away from the computer, got an email from Shelly, and responded just with tears. This is part of the childhood emotional neglect. And I'll tell you, with COVID, I've gotten so wrapped up and into having to take care of myself. And it really has kind of stripped me of that ease and the joy of giving and receiving. And, this rule of I have to do my bonus episodes, that's what the rule is. And I really do want to have abundance and generosity. And there are so many ways that I give so freely of my time and my energy. And because it comes naturally to me, I don't often recognize it as being a gift to other people. And I want to freely receive as well. And so, Shelly, thank you so much for your generosity. We sat down yesterday. We had a planning meeting for the year to help me get a little bit more organized. I really have been accepting more help from people to help the podcast, my business run a little bit more smoother, to be able to help with some of the planning. So Melissa Huggs, thank you for all of your help and support in getting the store set up. Shelly at ShellyAaron Productions. If you need any audio editing, any video editing, her contact information is in the show notes. I'm just so incredibly grateful. I told you that I was going to review the 10 tips for you. I finished recording, totally forgot to do it. So again, thank you to ShellyAaron, my editor, who is adding this back into the episode. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is, I'm telling you that I'm having brain fog. It's hard to focus. It's hard to concentrate. I'm forgetting stuff. These are things that in general are part of the things that I struggle with. I have a ton of amazing gifts to offer the world. And I really want to be transparent that everybody has stuff that we excel at and other stuff that we struggle with. No shame in it. I just want to own it and name it. And I'm so grateful that you're putting this back in, Shelly. So kudos to you. So the 10 ways that we can care for ourselves when we're struggling. 1, talk to at least one other person about how you're doing. 2, maintain basic self-care if possible. Decide what or where your wiggle room is and when you should be concerned. Things like showering, brushing your teeth, flossing your teeth, taking medications or supplements, getting dressed, getting out of bed, not going out. I thought maybe for the guys, shaving. 3, observing your patterns. Do you tend to keep busy? Do you withdraw? Do you withhold? 4, what would bring you pleasure? And this is guilt-free. Some suggestions or thoughts are reading, watching a movie, a special meal, an activity, taking a bath, baking. 5, do one small thing. Something about keeping up just a little bit of the momentum because it helps us to stay open and receive the blessings and gifts that there are. And that might mean responding to an email, a text, a phone call, keeping appointments. 6, kindness and self-compassion as much as you can manage, even if it's hard. 7, try and get outside for at least 10 minutes if possible. They also have lights that you can get for seasonal affective disorder. I'm not sure what they are, but you can look. They've got them on Amazon or other places. I don't want to support Amazon, but it's easy and convenient. That's another podcast episode. 8, start tracking your mood and noticing trends. This can really be reassuring. And there are some apps that you can use that help to track your mood so that you get an idea of when you typically have rougher times and when you may do really well. 9, talk about your resistance, your anger, your frustration, your sadness, your disappointment. Even if you don't like what's going on in the way that you would like for it to be, not in a way that's harmful to yourself, but say, like, I really want to be exercising. I want to be outside. I want to be making better food choices. And like, I'm just not able to right now. Feelings are energy, and when we don't express our feelings, it gets trapped, and that also contributes to a lowered mood state. And then 10 is acknowledge 3 things that you've done each day. This is really important. We've got to focus on the things that are going well as well as all the other stuff. I think that's it. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.